Malaysia juga menghadapi cabaran yang agak getir. Kadar pengangguran di Malaysia adalah di paras 3.9%.
So, isu yang tak settle-settle di Malaysia lagi adalah pengangguran.
Pengangguran meningkat kepada 5.0% pada bulan April 2020.
Mustahil ke kalau kita nak lahirkan usahawan sebenar melalui pendidikan tinggi?
Kalau kita tengok artikel tentang situasi di Malaysia, ada 200,000 graduan yang tak ada kerja.
Disebabkan teknologi yang berubah, perubahan ekonomi, perubahan pemikiran generasi baru, education yang dulu tu mungkin tidak lagi bersesuaian.
Dan mengikut anjuran Jabatan Perangkaan Malaysia pada 14 Mei 2020, kadar pengangguran dijangka akan meningkat.
A marriage, perkahwinan antara traditional learning and kemahiran. Welcome to the revolution.
Good morning. It's Thursday again. So, what do we have today? Hey, so good morning, Zati. Good morning, Amizar, Fatin. So good to see you all early this morning. Right. So we're going to continue with our series today to talk about how to manage our businesses through this pandemic. We are on day 2, so 2 more days to go to complete it. The tips, techniques about it. So today we're going to talk about managing your workforce. Yesterday we talked about basically being the leader in you, how we're going to manage the whole business and all the whole entire context. And today is about we look at our workforce. Hey Mizan, good morning to you. Well, I think we need to look at businesses here in 2 different contexts. Sometimes I may just generally talk about it in terms of the corporate atmosphere because this is where I'm generally more accustomed to. But what we're going to cover is managing our workforce in 2 contexts. One in the corporate environment, and second is to talk about our dear retailers. Maybe I talk about the second part first. If you look at retailers, I mean, as much as we who are in the corporate field or playing in the corporate arena has been feeling that pinch where we are going to talk about how do we manage workforce remotely, how do we look into our manpower planning. It's very, very different compared to how we're going to do it in terms of the retailers. Retailers, depending on which industry you're from, right? It could be some retailers during this pandemic has really suffered a lot as well because their business has automatically dropped because the demand has dropped. Examples of these retailers that are suffering will be maybe in the apparel business, the ones that are dealing with stationery, all right? So these are people generally will suffer. But on the other hand, I mean, restaurants, of course, plays very, very big important role as well. Amazon. So what about those retailers who has doubled their business? You mean, you look at me, what do you mean, Adrian? It's a pandemic. How do you double your business? I've spoken to a number of retailers, and there are retailers like, for example, IT industry. You know, when the MCO hit, the movement control order hit in Malaysia, the number of printer sales have skyrocketed until they'll be out of stock. There is no refillable inks. There are a lot of stuff that's ran out of stock during this time. Farah, good morning to you. So what we are saying is that not all businesses are affected. But now with the skyrocketing number of cases that we are having in locally, what can we do as leaders to manage our staff? Because let's put it this way. I've also heard of cases which are retailers, which are the staff are being affected. And when managing our workforce, yes, profits is one thing that is very important to all shareholders as well as running businesses. But if putting my staff force at the front line, and can you imagine retailers, you're standing there, the cashier maybe, and then there are hundreds of people, or few, I mean, of course, we're calling in terms of the number that's coming in right now, but although we do SOPs, we have temperature checks, we adhere to the SOPs, can we totally eliminate the risk? The answer is not, correct? Because ultimately, let's put it this way. We have cases which are asymptomatic and they do not have a temperature. I mean, they don't have increase of temperature. They just walk in, they innocently want to buy something. They are fully masked and everything. But what about the cashiers? You see, there will be some psychological impact as to our staff as well, isn't it? And imagine if you are running like fast-moving goods. It could be the supermarkets, the groceries. They have longer queues than normal because nobody is dining out. Everyone's dining home, so they are buying more groceries. Groceries, I go down to a grocery store at about 8 o'clock in the evening. The shelves are wiped out. It's empty. So can you imagine the volume of people coming through the whole day? And these people are generally standing there facing, not knowing who they are facing. So as leaders, what can you do for them? And yet at the same time, because of the standard operating procedures that are actually being in place, we may not be able to put full force. How now do we actually manage that? Because let's put it this way, if we overwork our staff who's in the front end, as we all know, overworking a person's body, would that drop the immune system? Am I right to say that? And if the person's immune system is dropped, then they are more easily succumb to virus attacks. So the idea here is we need to draw a balance. And the key recommendation is that based on my studies, looking at Harvard Business Reviews and all that, everyone said across the globe, they are saying that a recommended approach will be that we should let these staff have a longer period, a more relaxing environment. What they're saying is create a more relaxing environment, all right? So therefore, they will not be overworked, yet at the same time, keep the costs at a manageable amount. What I mean by manageable, it will definitely increase. For example, what I would do is, of course, it's a personal opinion, is that maybe have more shifts involved. Let's say if I'm talking about a supermarket environment, maybe I'll have the first shift from 10 a.m. to about maybe 2 a.m. and then there will be a mid shift in between and then another shift. That means during the time we don't have full force employment coming in, but yet at the same time, the people are not strained out because of the prolonged working hours. That's just an example that you can look at. So things like that we need to take into care as well, because at the end of the day, SOPs needs to be conducted. Maybe what we have to do is to really look at how we can actually help our employees, our staff members to boost their immunity, boost their morale as well, because remember, they are not only risking their lives, they are also risking the lives or the health of their family members as well, which we need to always take care. So like yesterday we were talking about checking on them on a constant basis, where we actually then get to know how's the family members doing, etc. All right, the second one, of course, if you're talking about not retailers, we're talking the corporate atmosphere. Of course, let's go into working remotely. Of course, most MNCs have started working remotely for the longest time. Some of us who are adapting to it, we are starting to go into remote as well. Now, looking at the two sides of the environment. One, of course, in the management standpoint, where we talk about how do I manage my staff who are working remotely. Of course, there are, please use technological tools as well. There are tools out there that help manage the staff performance. So that's where you can explore it. There are ways, hit into the EPME or whatever it is. I will send you some links where you can actually look at tools so you can help manage it. All right. So one thing is, of course, to manage it. But on the other hand, looking at the employee standpoint, how would a person really cope? You know, we always look at the business standpoint, but we need to always look at the employee standpoint. We are talking about parents. I mean, some of us are just single, or some of us who are married with kids. Basically, as you are trying to work, you are trying to get your kids to go on online school. They'll be screaming elsewhere because childcare center is not open. How do you manage that? Plus, working remotely as well. A study has been done among 50,000 people, and most of them have said they are not accustomed to working remotely. And this is the true fact. You see, every single human being, and if you've been following this videos of mine, you will realize one part of it is that we human beings create a map on a daily basis as a structure as to how should we operate on a daily basis. And can you imagine waking up one day and you don't have to go to work, and you said, okay, now you're going to work from home. You're not going to come to the office. You have to take care of the kids along the way. If you're a mother, even worse. You have to take care of the kids, make sure they go on online class. You have to make sure the food is prepared for lunch, prepared for dinner. And then at the same time, your boss is calling you to have an online meeting at 10 o'clock in the morning. And there's a customer meeting at 2 o'clock, and 3 o'clock, there's something on again. And then now you have to answer all your emails before 5 o'clock because you have got subordinates to answer to. And for those who are managing other time zones, you have to work late at night. So can you imagine the amount of stress that the person would have to adopt? Most of us, like people like me, to be very frank and honest, I'm also a human being. I rather run off to the office and forget about the kids. Don't have to forget about other things. I can totally focus on one item, which is building businesses and educating people in running businesses. So that is one thing that most employees are going to face. One thing I've learned from a good friend of mine by the name of Ian Homer some time ago during the first MCO hit, he said, Adrian, there's one thing that you should be able to do. You need to be able to come up with a time sheet, all right, like you used to do when you were going to work. If you're going to have a time sheet, automatically your brains will start wiring your body to move up and perk up to that environment at that point. So I would, and especially people like me will have to manage different businesses and all that. Okay, we would actually talk about how then do we segregate the time. All right, so in the morning, which company I deal with, what do I do? Second part of the morning, what else do I do? And automatically, when our body goes into that routine, we become more productive. And this is what we can do as leaders, my friends, is that work with your team, all right? When you're doing remotely, work with your team to come out to have a structure. And automatically, this is just a transition period where we get used to that structure and therefore be able to keep on improving along the way. Of course, constant review, constant touch point is very important. The other thing that we want to look at is really about managing how do we say if there's redundancy in positions. We are talking about redundancy in roles, etc. I mean, if you're going to do the layoff, how do you actually do it? Because I know some businesses are really affected. Now we actually could not afford to keep the employee. How do we do that kind of laying offs? Okay. Tomorrow we'll cover a little bit more when you manage yourself and manage other people in terms of how to lay it off with more compassion. I've been seeing a lot of cases that because people want to lay it off easily, they're using legal loopholes to kind of like chop people off, to say that you're not good enough, you're not up to our standards, which bring in psychological repercussions as to the person, because their intent is to lay a person off, but you are not doing it in a very tactful manner. And generally, it's always led by the emotional challenge that is followed by leaders. So tomorrow it's about how do you actually manage your own self. All right, one last one before I call it a day is that, let's say in the event, touch wood, unfortunately, if any of your team members or your staff force were to be tested to be positive, as a leader, what do you do? So this is general for both retailers as well as corporates. Corporates, if you've been working remotely, it'd be easier, but the similar thing will happen is that what if there has been a close contact? Because other staff members would also be very worried as well. This is when you need to work very closely with your HR business partner to see what steps do we go in for screening, how do we isolate ourselves, what's the SOP involved. This is when I really love the 5S methodology, where everything is documented. And let's say if you're going to relieve a staff member of a job, where do we find the file? So we can find a replacement almost immediately. So structures in place, you make sure your standard operating procedures are there. Need to be compassionate to those people. Please treat your friends or your colleagues, your staff with respect in the event they're positive. Give them more hope, give them more comfort on the part of the company standpoint. All right, so ultimately we are driving this through together as a team. So it's a matter of time that we will ride through that particular storm. So tomorrow we're going to come back and how do you manage yourself as a leader? Because let's put it this way, everything rise and fall based on leadership, according to John Maxwell, right? And if you want to see the quality of fish, I love to go to the market to buy groceries. If you want to see whether the fish is fresh, always look at the head. If the head is good, the rest of it will be good. So tomorrow it's all about leadership through crisis. All right. So thank you very much for tuning in. Hit me, follow us, share us, and we'll talk again tomorrow. Till then, goodbye.
Malaysia juga menghadapi cabaran yang agak getir. Kadar pengangguran di Malaysia adalah di paras 3.9%.
So, isu yang tak settle-settle di Malaysia lagi adalah pengangguran.
Pengangguran meningkat kepada 5.0% pada bulan April 2020.
Mustahil ke kalau kita nak lahirkan usahawan sebenar melalui pendidikan tinggi?
Kalau kita tengok artikel tentang situasi di Malaysia, ada 200,000 graduan yang tak ada kerja.
Disebabkan teknologi yang berubah, perubahan ekonomi, perubahan pemikiran generasi baru, education yang dulu tu mungkin tidak lagi bersesuaian.
Dan mengikut anjuran Jabatan Perangkaan Malaysia pada 14 Mei 2020, kadar pengangguran dijangka akan meningkat.
A marriage perkahwinan antara traditional learning and kemahiran. Welcome to the revolution.